Hello and welcome to another beautiful conversation in our Co-Creating Compassionate Communities series for Feast for the Soul 2023. And I have with me tonight, or today, Marilyn Hamilton, who is based in the Ecovillage at Findhorn in Scotland, and also is founder of Integral City and also a new project, or newish project this last year, Living Cities Earth. So I'm going to ask Marilyn firstly to say hi, and just share a little bit. You've shared a little bit about Findhorn, but for the recording, Marilyn, if you could just share where you're from and where you're living now, and then a little bit about your Integral City project, and then we'll move on to Living Cities Earth. So welcome and thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Sue, and thank you very much for the generous invitation and having the opportunity to be with people during the meditation is really inspiring for me. As you say, I now live in Findhorn Ecovillage. This is the country of the land of my ancestors. My grandmother was Scottish, and my husband was also Scottish. And so before I came here 5 years ago, I was living in Abbotsford, British Columbia in Canada. And prior to that, I'd had a career that really took me all around the world in many ways. And I was called over many years to work with the human system at different scales. So I started out working with individuals, and then developing leaders, and then developing teams, and then developing organizations, and then sectors, and then communities. And then, as we spoke a little while ago, I was called to look at the city. And so at first, I didn't have the background or the framework to look at the city. So I offered to the still small voice who was calling me. I said, well, I'll look at the city as if it was a human system. Well, that's a good start. So I then started to explore the whole ways of looking at life through systems thinking. But also I was called, as you mentioned earlier, to be influenced by Ken Wilber's work, which took me back to school. And when I went back to school, I started to look at learning and leadership in self-organizing online systems, online communities. And this was before Facebook. So this was just a couple of years before the world exploded into these online communities. And through that process, I gained a much deeper insight that I had said that my husband built the city. So he was working with the bricks and mortar. He was dealing with people's actions and the infrastructure of cities. But when I came along and wanted to offer living systems, human systems, integral ways of looking at it, I looked at cities with consciousness and culture plus actions and the infrastructures. And that led me to realize that consciousness and culture is about place caring, and the actions and systems are about place making. So when I look at cities now, I'm looking for how do we grow and connect and relate to one another so that we place care as well as place make. And I would say that became the essence of what I learned through working particularly in my city in Abbotsford in Canada, in British Columbia, how we all worked and lived together there. And I opened up to seeing not only the manifest life of cities, but also the spiritual life of cities. When I was going to a conference in that period of time, I was listening to an interview with James Lovelock, and James Lovelock said that the earth herself, Gaia, was a living system, and that humans were Gaia's local, not only local representatives, but humans were Gaia's reflective organ. And I went, oh, I know what that means for my work. It means that the cities are the organ, and the organizations are like organelles, and individuals are like cells. So it gave me a whole new inspiration to see cities as complex, adaptive, alive systems. So that has become very much a part of Integral City, and that is a place where I swept you into, Sue, when I started to teach about the Gaia's Code of Care. I called it the Master Code of Care. You wanted to call it the Mother Code of Care. And I have, in 2023, finally decided I think it's Gaia's Code of Care. And that Code of Care says simply, we must learn to care for ourselves so we can care for each other. And all together we care for our places. And then we can care for the planet. That's a little bit about my background and how I came to be working with Integral City Meshworks.
This just makes my heart sing, because you're an academic with huge background in academia, and you have the spiritual side to it. And from the spiritual side is the caring side. And I was, enthralled when we first met, that balance is very evident in all your work. So caring, then this is the message from Feast: care for yourself, then you overspill to others, and then overspill into your places, and then into the earth and into the planetary cosmos. So that's the mother, I have to keep saying it, but I will call it the Gaia Codes of Care. And I love that. And then, of course, you work with the 4 voices of the city. And I wonder if you'd explain the biomimicry of that.
Yes, thanks, Sue. Even when we did the meditation, I called in what I named as the 4 archetypal voices of the city. So when I started to look at the city as a living system, you mentioned that I was inspired by the spiritual qualities and energies of the city, but I also started to ask questions about how can we learn from other living systems. And one of the systems I was drawn to look at were the honeybees. And honeybees actually are very complex invertebrates. We're supposed to be the most complex species of the vertebrates. And I wondered, since they've been around for 100 million years, what could we learn from them? And so I learned that, amongst other things, they have 50,000 bees in a wild hive. That's about the same size as a small town. And they also can communicate with one another. So the way that they communicate is not as we do with voice and language. Their language is actually through pheromones, through chemistry, but also the famous bee dance. So how the beehive works is it actually has a set of goals, a goal to produce a certain amount of honey every year to sustain the hive. And out of that, I learned that the 4 roles within the hive are, excuse me, they're related to what I would say are 4 roles in the city. The citizens are like the producers that go out and collect the pollen and the nectar and bring that back. And when they come back to the beehive, they do this little waggle dance that tells all the other bees where to go and collect that. So they're quite really strong. Maybe about 90% of the hive are producers, like our citizens. There's also another group that are called diversity generators, which I think of as being the business innovators in the city. And so they're always going to a different place so that the bees always have another alternative renewable source of their energy. So that's something that we can learn from as well. And together with 2 other voices in the hive, the voice of what in the hive is called the resource allocators, but I would say they're like our civic managers, and the inner judge of the hive, which I would say is actually our 3rd sector, our faith communities. And our faith communities and our civic managers, between them, tell us how can we actually manage the city, do the place making, but also the place caring. So those 4 voices, the citizens, the business innovators, the civic managers, and the 3rd sector, I think make up the whole city. And when I come into a city and people invite me to start working there, I always ask, as I did when I came to Nottingham, could I meet with the 4 voices? Let's bring them around the table. Let's learn how they see the city together.
And you did. You came and stayed with me for a little while, which was fabulous. And the four voices were very intrigued to meet you, as I'd shared this. And we set up a very successful initiative called Youth Voice in Action. How can we hear the voice of the children? And the councillors came, the charities came, the faith communities came, the people who can make decision and have got resources to do that, to allow this project to take shape, and was incredibly successful. So Marilyn, from my heart, truly, what happened within that project, which was funded by the Community Foundation, has opened a whole portal in our city where the positively empowered kids who led it are just exponentially going out into communities and into schools. So I know it works. I know it works, but it's good to have had that direct experience. And I love the honeybees. Moving on from Integral Cities is your new project, your new community project, which is called Living Cities Earth. And I wonder if you'd share more about that. So we can put the websites in the chat so that people can do their own exploration afterwards. But coming from you would be great. Thanks.
Thanks for that invitation, Sue. So, when you think about where I live in Findhorn, it's an eco-village that has maybe about 400 people who live in it. So it really has the village where you feel like you see everybody every day kind of thing as you're going about your normal life. And as you point out, Sue, I've thought for a number of decades now about what are the archetypes of the city? What are the universal truths that we have to learn about, the major qualities of life or aliveness, beauty, truth, and goodness, if you will, the place caring and the place making that come out of that. And in the last year, we've had not only a number of the world's great challenges continue to multiply, the challenge of climate change, the challenge of the pandemic, but we also had the war in Europe that completely got most people by surprise. And when I saw the number of people who were moving out of the Ukraine into the rest of Europe, like millions of them, 7 million people by at least one count, as well as that same number of people displaced inside the country, I thought at the time, this is going to change Europe because those people will want to naturally find some location in the other cities of Europe. And so I reached out to the people who had been working with me in the Integral City work. And interestingly enough, there were many people in Russia. So my work has been translated into Russian, and I wondered how they would be responding to these conditions because I really couldn't believe that they would be supporting the war. And it turns out, of course, that they weren't, and that in fact they had left the country, and many of them are in a diaspora around the world that continues to grow. And they also, along with all the other countries of Europe who had picked up my work, and the people in Canada and the United States and other countries around the world and other cities, we started to reach out to one another and asked, is there a way that we can come together and see if we can serve the complex adaptive living systems of cities and see if we can use this as a turning point to take the dissonances in the world and turn them inside out and use that as an opportunity to learn together. And so my book is named Integral City, but in Russian it got actually translated into Living Cities. But we decided when we were looking for a name that we would borrow the core of that because it also translates well into other languages, and that what we were really doing was Living Cities Earth. So in this case, what we're looking at is how the inspiration of being Gaia's reflective organs as cities, whether we could actually reach out and connect 10,000 cities and millions of people, and how would we invite them to come into this endeavor, was that we thought that the attraction would be aliveness. How can we show and amplify aliveness in our cities. It's often a question I use when I come into a community. I am sure I used it when I was with you in Nottingham, Sue, and others of our ventures, where I will simply sit with a group of people and say, so where is a place in your city where you felt truly alive? And usually it doesn't take very long for somebody to say, oh, it's down, at the market, or it's when I go and play music, or it's when I'm cooking with others, or it's this sports team, or something that we're creating that's becoming a whole new market. All of those opportunities bring aliveness into the city. And we feel that by amplifying that, giving people a chance to self-organize, even that this isn't a top-down movement, but more a grassroots and a middle and a top. It's all together, everything, bringing those four voices together. So that's what we're doing with Living Cities Earth. And that's one of the meetings that, in fact, is going on while we're having a chat here. And Living Cities Earth is, I think, going to take the inspiration that James Lovelock gave me, which was cities and organizations and humans together are organs, organelles, and cells that make up Gaia's reflective organ. And as, in fact, that piece I read about from Dorothy, where she said that really what aliveness and consciousness is about is love. And the more that we can create the conditions for love, the more aliveness we will have in our cities.
Yes. Oh my goodness, you take my breath away. I mean, it's what we need now. It's what so many people are working towards, and that, as we find each other and we build these communities, and I know I say it very frequently, but it's, as people are awakening to the true nature, their true nature, and maybe a different reality, a more conscious reality. The container is the compassionate community where people can feel held and heard and seen, and this is what you're creating. And Marilyn, I'm incredibly grateful for you sharing all this. It's a very big container, but it's a natural progression for you, isn't it? Out of Integral City, you'll still have Integral City. So my question to you is, what can the feast do for you? We are passionate about this community. We are a community. Is there anything that we can do in terms of letting people know about your work?
Oh, thank you. That's a beautiful invitation as well. So the meditation that I just led, that's something that I would like to see happen on a regular basis, on a wider basis. So if there's some way that we could weave that into not just the Feast for the Soul in this 40 days that you're leading, but can we do it on a regular monthly basis? And who would like to join us in doing that? I am going to be integrating this into Living Cities Earth. And we have been working with the Charter for Compassion and the Compassionate Cities in the last little while. And I know that we have somehow not found the sweet spot for this to become a practice. So that would be one way that we would be able to naturally, I think, take advantage of our mutual care of the soul. Because I think for many people to think that their city itself has a soul is maybe a new idea. So, and you're inviting me into the Feast for the Soul. I was really just feeling myself extremely grateful to have this opportunity to share with people that the city, our towns, our villages are wonderful ways that we can amplify our spiritual practice, and that in doing that, it also brings the beauty, truth, and goodness into the city that we so much want as we mature as a species, which I think Gaia is calling us to do.
It ignites the flickering flame in the heart, and then I know what happened here. It's been flickering for a long time, and then it's, oh my goodness, look at us, we're all wanting the same thing. What can we do together? And your invitation to continue to do the meditations, absolutely. You know, Feast for the Soul has a 40-day container, but there's a lot of us who are doing this outside this. So I see those incredible opportunities moving forward. So Marilyn, what I suggest now is I'll just stop the recording.